Hello, everyone. I'm Rosa Linda Román. I go by Rosa Linda, and I am checking in from our family's floating home, a catamaran, currently docked at a marina in Port Ginesta, Spain, which is just west of Barcelona. I'm recording this in my stateroom in the cabin, thinking. I said to my sweetheart, hey, I'm going to do the recording because we're in Spain. It's supposed to be every week I read a chapter of my book, Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family. I read a chapter here each week at noon, New Mexico time, which is mountain time. Well, the problem is now that we've moved onto the boat in Spain, the timing is really off because Spanish people do things very different timing wise than people do in the United States. Specifically, they have business hours during the day, and then there's like a whole chunk of time in the middle of the day that all the businesses close and they stop doing work. And it's sometimes from like 1 to 4, maybe 4:30, or maybe I don't even know what time it is. But bottom line is, we're used to eating dinner at like 5 or 6 at the latest. Here, everything doesn't even start opening back up again until 7, 8. And we keep going to bed like at midnight. I'm a morning person, so I've been getting up early on one end and then going to sleep late. So I understand why the Spanish people have siestas. All of this to say, it's been a little bit challenging to do these live streams. So I said, well, the family's at the beach and I had just come back from the beach. So I said, I'm going to record this really quickly because they want to go to dinner after this. I am delighted to tell you that my daughter, Hava, just arrived today. My nieces, 4 of my nieces have been here. They flew in from Chicago. 2 sadly left today, but 2 are still here. So we're going to go out to dinner with them tonight. So I was really excited about that. And I thought, well, let me just record this because I don't want to not do my lives. So we're going to do kind of a look live and recording. But it's so funny because I said to my sweetheart, we got back from the beach together and I said, hey, I'm going to do that recording. And then I swear, he was like, hey, herd of elephants and construction crews, why don't you guys come and let's talk? And I need to holler at the kids and whatever. So I'm laughing. You will probably hear noises, but it is what it is. It's time to embrace the reality of my current situation. So let me just share with you that I'm going to read a chapter of this book. And if it's loud, I apologize. So here we go. This is Losing Sight of the Shore, How to Live on a Boat Without Killing Your Family, Chapter 25, Nannies. While Nathan and I may have been the primary caregivers on the Dawn Treader and Hakuna Matata, we were gratefully not always alone in the kid wrangling department. From time to time during our liveaboard lives, we also had a nanny on board. Having that extra grown-up there was a godsend. When things go wrong on a boat, it takes all you have to give just to deal with the situation at hand. Add kids to the mix and it can get downright dangerous. Having someone there whose primary focus is making sure the kids are okay while mommy and daddy are busy fixing a boat problem can make all the difference. This became even more critical for us once we had 3 kids. When we had the 2 girls, Nathan and I could each take a kid aside if there was a problem. But once Samuel came along, we were forever outnumbered. Football-loving Nathan likes to tell people that when we had 2 kids, it was man on man. But 3 kids, we have to play zone defense, and someone is always getting away. Adding a nanny to the mix levels the playing field. During our liveaboard lives, we were privileged to have 4 nannies to help us along the way. Each only stayed with us for a few months because they had big dreams and plans of their own to get to. But during the time they were with us, they were each a blessing. They not only made a huge difference when we were living on those boats, but are still an important part of our lives today. Just this morning, I got a text from our Hakuna Matata nanny reading, There's There's no way I can possibly discover this song and not share with y'all. This was followed by a crying laughing emoji and a link to a song called If You Ain't Been Aground by Eric Stone, with a chorus that goes, if you ain't been aground, well, you ain't been around. Even seasoned sailors can wind up on the reef. This gave us both a big laugh and took us on a walk down memory lane. The song is about the fact that every sailor worth his or her salt has probably run aground at some point or another. For you landlubbers, running aground is the term for that awful moment when you suddenly, sometimes painfully, realize that you have overestimated the depth of the water that your boat is moving through. Most of the time this happens at low tide when you find yourself accidentally sitting on a sandbar because the water is too shallow for your draft, which is the depth of your boat below the waterline. When this happens, as long as it is just a shallower than expected sandy bottom, which won't let go of your boat, then you do as the above mentioned song suggests, and you just try not to stress because it can happen to the best, and just pray to God that high tide sets you free. Once the tide changes, the water gets deeper and your boat will likely be back on its way without anything more terrible than having the sand rub the barnacles and algae off the bottom of your boat. If, however, what you hit is a reef, then that would be an entirely different matter. Depending on how hard you hit it, you may find damage below the waterline, which would be any boat owner's worst nightmare. Gratefully, whoops, my microphone, 1 second. All right. Gratefully, the running aground incident that Miss Melissa was referring to was of the sandy bottom variety. Here's how Captain Nate remembers it. One of the warnings you always get when you go to the Bahamas is make sure you never enter a channel or approach a new island at night. As a novice Bahamian sailor, you always wonder why that is, because the channels are well marked and you are religiously following your charts. We learned the hard way that there is a very good reason for these warnings. We had been in and out, somebody's yelling up top. We had been in and out of the channel where we had been staying. I'm sorry, the lighting is really dark here. Where we had been staying, give me a second. We had been in and out of the channel where we had been staying many, many times during the day. It was well marked and had a white center line marker and appropriate red and green markers. But one night we were out late watching the sunset and we decided it was no big deal since we had been through there many, many times before. We made it all the way back to the channel to Sea Spray Marina when we arrived just to the port side of the center line marker. I will admit that we were going a little faster than usual because we wanted to get to a football game, and suddenly we ran aground hard. Once we ran aground, there was no moving the boat. We tried reversing the engines. We tried dropping the anchor to pull us out. We tried using the dinghy to pull us out, but there was no way to move the boat. So we decided that the only thing left to do was to send the ladies and the crew to the dock in the dinghy, and I stayed, meaning Nathan, stayed with the boat and waited for the tide to turn. About 2 hours later, the tide came up and we were easily able to move off the shoal. When I got back to Sea Spray, I talked to the dockmaster and told him I was surprised that I had run aground just off the center line marker. He said, "We don't have a center line marker." I said, "What do you mean?" "It is the furthest out white marker in the... Okay, it's still recording, but I lost myself. So he said, "What do you mean?" "It's the furthest out white marker in the center of the channel." He laughed. "That isn't a center line marker. That's a green channel marker. But when the light went out, we didn't have a green one on hand, so we just put a white one in instead." And now we understand why they say you shouldn't enter a channel in the Bahamas at night. I can tell you There are always stories like this that leave you scratching your head and make for some very interesting adventures along the way. Not just in the Bahamas, but in most places you might take a boat. It is part of the reason you have to stay on your toes and pay attention at all times, and why I was so glad to have that extra grown-up on board to help wrangle the kids. But on that fateful night when Hakuna Matata was stranded on the sandbar, Miss Melissa had another unexpected boating adventure of her own. As he mentioned, knowing his wife is an avid Florida Gators fan, Nathan encouraged us to go watch the game on shore while he stayed aboard Hakuna Matata to wait for the tide to change. So Miss Melissa, Ahava, Ziva, and I took the dinghy to shore to head to the Abaco Inn. At some point while I was watching the game, Miss Melissa headed back to the boat alone. Here's how she remembers what happened next. Quote, "It was supposed to be a quick trip to take some ice back to Nathan on the boat. I took the dinghy around dusk to run the ice over to him. I remember there was a Gators game on, so we were at the Abaco Inn, I believe it was, to watch the game. I didn't get very far from shore when the dinghy just shut off, but then it started back again for almost 30 more seconds, shut off again, and was done. Nothing. I was floating in the channel. There was no way to get the attention of anyone on shore as I was too far offshore, and it was loud with the game on and getting dark. I found the oars and just started paddling. This was before I had a ton of solo paddling experience on my own, so was less than efficient. Plus, I was fighting a rising tide and some chop and wind and was getting pushed pretty far off off to the right to a little chunk of land. At one point, I thought I may just have to beach it and wait it out on a little sandbar / island and have a Survivor-esque overnight adventure. But I was making headway. I could see shore and Nathan. I was never so far, but it was dark, so no one could see me by this point. I finally got super close to Hakuna Matata. I could nearly smell it, and I could see Nathan on the deck, but he hadn't seen me yet. At that moment, he started the engine and had come free from the sandbar, and I thought he was going to speed away from me. I fumbled around the dinghy and finally found the air horn. Then I was rescued, and I remember you promptly gave me a cocktail upon me making it back to the bar. I gave her a cocktail. So now you can understand why Melissa got such a smile from that running aground song, a perfect reminder of that perfectly ridiculous series of events. As always, Miss Melissa was a great sport about the whole thing, and we all learned a lot of valuable lessons that day. For starters, we never leave the boat without a working VHF radio in hand now. And lights are mandatory on dinghies at night. One on the boat itself, plus a flashlight in hand. All procedures we should have had in place all along. Gratefully, none of our mistakes were life-threatening, and we all became better boaters because of them. Miss Melissa made us better because of the time she spent with us, and the same could be said for all 3 of the other nannies we had on board. Having a nanny, especially on a boat, can really make a tremendous difference. Having that extra grown-up on board can be very helpful in the homeschooling, sailing, and general kid management departments. Granted, you will still find yourself in challenging situations, perhaps even some which leave you both you and the nanny, feeling unsure of which direction to go. But if the nanny is a good fit for your family, you can troubleshoot and commiserate together, making a sometimes thankless job a lot less lonely. Plus, adding a nanny to the crew, we now had a 3-kid to 3 grown-up ratio, returning us to man-on-man defense again. That is definitely a touchdown in my book. And that is chapter 25 of Losing Sight of the Shore, and that is about nannies. I hope you enjoyed this reading, a little bit loud in the background and a little stumbly on my part, but that's boat life. And I wanted to keep these live streams going because this is how I am sharing not only our past liveaboard adventures, but now I am sharing a lot of it on my channel, my Substack channel. So if you're interested in learning more about that, in the show notes, I have a link to my Substack, which is rosalindaroman.substack.com. And that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I hope you all have fair winds and following seas. Talk to you soon. Bye.